Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event on Tunisia's economic challenges. While Tunisia has managed to weather the COVID-19 pandemic relatively well, the economy has suffered dramatically. The pandemic will likely push unemployment up to above 20%, while the economy is expected to contract by nearly 7% this year. At the same time, Prime Minister Fakhfakh recently resigned, and President Said is expected to announce a new candidate for the Prime Minister on Saturday. Here to discuss how Tunisia can address these and other economic challenges are three fabulous experts. Mehdi Ben Abdallah is the founder and managing partner of Excalibur International Advisory, president of the Tunisian-British Chamber of Commerce, and a board member of the American Chamber of Commerce in Tunisia. Ons Ben Abdelkarim is the country representative in Tunisia for Expectation State, and Eymen Errais is the strategic and investment advisor of the USAID-funded project Tunisia JOBS. After a brief discussion with our panelists, we will turn to the audience for questions. Please, if you have questions, submit them in the YouTube chat, or you can privately submit questions to middleeast@ceip.org. Now, panelists, let me start by asking each of you to tell us what you see as the biggest economic challenge in Tunisia facing us today. And I'm going to start with Mehdi.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. And I hope next time we'll be all together, not only by video, as here in Tunis. Thanks for your question. Tunisia is, like many countries around the world, is facing a number of economic challenges. But Tunisia is facing some specific to it, especially with a post-revolution environment, post-COVID and so on. Clearly, unemployment is the key one, and especially unemployment for youth and for the young generation and a young graduate. The second one I would see is a public debt and public spending that is increasing tremendously and weakening the financial situation of the country. Of course, that also comes from the decline of strategic sectors. We cannot mention that without talking about the production of phosphate. And then Tunisia is just announced that we might be starting to import phosphate, which is absolutely incredible for Tunisia, and the oil and gas production. Of course, the other three or two, I would say, that are very important is the decline of tourism that was hit this past few years since the revolution, of course, by the revolution environment, by the terrorism at a certain time. We started picking up, but unfortunately the COVID is hitting us again just before the big summer season. Adding to that, I would say the two other sectors that were hit economically is two public services, is the education sector and the health sector, who are, with the fact that these two sectors have, the quality of the service has deteriorated. It's pushing the medium household to go to the private sector, both for health and for education, which is weakening their purchasing power, and that is an important economic impact in Tunisia. But here we jump directly to the economic impact, but really, especially you mentioned the change again in head of government in Tunisia. It's unfortunate to say that the real economic challenge in Tunisia is first political. It's political and it's social. Is the political instability that is really, really difficult for Tunisia, and maybe the lack of social partnership between the state, or say the government, and the union, that is taking the country to an efficient state company that is increasing the spending of the country, and a disturbance for the private sector that is so important for investment in country. And that, of course, leads to barrier for economic development and the lack of attraction of investment, and very importantly for Tunisia, of foreign direct investment. And that, of course, leads to hurt of our GDP, increasing of debt, and back again, the circle to the key problem, what is increase of unemployment with a young generation. And what we see today with the COVID is what is also something that we need to address very seriously. It's not only a problem of creating employment for the youth, but with the COVID, like any other country, is a risk to see us losing existing jobs and existing employment And that is something that has to be addressed very quickly.
Thank you very much. You've laid out a lot of different challenges. Ons, what do you see as the biggest challenge or challenges?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to take part in this conversation at a very challenging time for the world, but specifically for Tunisia. I think that Tunisia, has a lot of other developing countries, to be able to recover from the COVID-19 crisis, there is an absolute need for attracting more capital. And I want specifically to talk about the issue of FDI and the FDI flows that is a way to attract more capital in a very, very specific time and challenging time for the country. And this, of course, to be able to ensure growth and create more employment opportunities that are very much needed, as mentioned by Mehdi, specifically in a situation where social crisis can be very close and be very alarming for the country. When we are talking about FDI flows, I think it's important to, from that perspective, to be able to emphasize the importance not only to attract more FDIs, but also to be able to retain more FDIs. And here we can talk specifically about three key challenges that Tunisia is specifically facing in this situation. The first one is that Tunisia has been struggling with attracting more FDI and retaining since years now. And due to the economic instability, due also to security problems, etc. But here there is an added element, which is that today the crisis is global. We are talking about an estimation of a decrease in global FDI of 30 to 40% in 2021 at a global level. So necessarily this is going to have an impact on the situation in a country where FDI is structural to the economy like Tunisia. Facing this global crisis cannot be treated with business as usual. You cannot continue the same mindset with the same way of doing reform or approaching reform, because what used to be, let's say, important and critical is today vital for the survival of the country. So, and this takes us to the second challenge, that today Tunisia cannot say, I want to go back to normal, because there is a new normal, which is not necessarily linked to the internal factors, but is very much led by the external dynamics out there at the global level due to the pandemic. And being in a country with very strong barriers to investment that the government has been working on, but today are very problematic, related to problems of governance, problem of limits to reform related to vested interests, the problems also of the lack of competitiveness, the lack of, again, the lack of openness of the market, the challenges that an investor is facing in normal context today are even more problematic and pushes the situation to be a critical one. Especially in a context where competition is very hard, when you have opportunities out of the crisis, but you have everyone competing for the same opportunities. So if you don't move forward, you are not staying in the same place, you are moving backwards. And this is also a key challenge that we need to be able to take into consideration within the country. The last maybe element that I want to highlight is being in a situation of crisis, again linked to investment, does not offer us as a country the opportunity to ask the question of the notion of quality of investment, the notion also of the sustainability of the type of the investment that we want to attract. And this really takes the debate from what really we mean by growth to find ourselves in a situation where we take whatever we find without really thinking in a very strategic matter. And I will link this necessarily, if we talk about strategy and vision, I will link that necessarily to the aspect of instability, because in the end, the most essential challenge that we are facing, because this is supposed to be something that we are in control of, which is the internal situation and the political situation. And this is unfortunately one of the key weaknesses of us as a country today, is to find ourselves in a very turbulent situation, which does not allow us to make vision, to take even to make opportunities from the crisis that we are witnessing today.
Thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. And to you, Eymen, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing Tunisia today?
Well, Tunisia, as was mentioned by Ons as well, is part of a global supply chain, and the supply chain was distorted globally. So you have industry basically who are focused on part of the supply chain. They don't have anymore the supplier of the raw material. They don't have their client on. They are basically dependent of the exchange between countries that they can't use. Just give you some numbers. In Tunisia, about 75% of the companies actually was hit by the crisis, 80% of them having distortion of their supply chain, and 67% of them having financial difficulties, with 44% of the export orders being canceled. And we saw this directly in the international market. You know, the emerging market spreads have reached a historical level that makes almost impossible for Tunisia to issue euro bonds on the international markets. I mean, if you think about it, the Tunisian euro bond that was issued a year ago, maturing in 2025 at 575, is now trading at a yield of 12.5%. This yield was 6.6%. This is an increase of almost 7%, meaning 700 basis points. With public finances with a huge gap of about 12 billion dinars, this gap is almost unmanageable. Now, this looks really, you know, ugly and bad, but there are some also opportunities. I mean, the crisis showed that there is a radical shift to let's say digital business. In a matter of days, people massively stepped up their use of technology. We're talking about e-education, e-banking, e-delivering, e-services. Will that adoption remain post-crisis? We'll be back on the status quo? We don't know yet. I think the key thing for Tunisia is, would we be using this, let's say, shift of paradigm as an opportunity? Where people see threats, we see opportunities. If we do that, that would work. If we stay with the old economy, it's not gonna work. You know what we saw? People believe in what you believe, they don't believe in what you do. And this is bridged me directly to the political situation. If we have a government that basically say, okay, we can't work as before, this is an opportunity, let's move on, let's change the whole thing, let's talk about the e-government, let's help business make business, basically, and make money. I'll give you an example that actually can surprise you, Sarah. You know, everybody's talking about informal economy, and they're gonna suffer, et cetera, et cetera. What helped Tunisian economy survive during COVID is informal economy. I was talking to some financial industries, whether are banks or leasing companies. The SMEs, or the small, very small SMEs that they have 1 or 2 employees, they did survive. They paid their credit. They didn't have any issue. You know why? Because if the guy who basically take a truck on the leasing and he can't transport goods because it stopped everything, you know what he did? He just bought some vegetables, put them on the truck and sell them on the street. It's informal, but that informality actually gave this adaptability. So think about it, you don't have to be informal anymore because you know everything is free. You don't need authorization if you want to sell vegetables, because all that you need is basically to show that you paid your taxes last year, and that's it. So what I'm trying to say, I don't want to take all the time because this is the first question, is there are bad things, there are good things, there are opportunities here. I think Tunisian economy is small enough that it can adapt and it can change. If you think about it, the whole budget that we need is the amount of money that General Motors got in 2008 from the government to change the whole country. That's all that we need. That's it.
Thank you. These have been really interesting. You guys have listed out a whole variety of issues and challenges, and I want to drill down on some of them. But first, one thing that I don't think was really mentioned is the issue of regional marginalization. And sorry, actually, before I say that, I just want to remind people that if you have questions, to please submit them either in the YouTube chat or to middleeast@ceip.org. But returning to regional marginalization, so One of the things that I think we've seen through COVID is that it's really highlighted the regional inequalities, and that you've seen, whether it's healthcare, education, infrastructure, that there's tremendous disparity between the interior and south regions and the coast. This is something that was well known, but this has kind of been highlighted through COVID. And now we're seeing the return of the Comore protests that are, coming out to say the government never implemented the agreement it made in 2017. And I'm curious of, what do you guys think, how can Tunisia, whether it's the government, civil society, the private sector, or even the international community, how does this role of regional marginalization fit into the other challenges you've mentioned, and what can be done to actually address this? Or do you expect to just see this cycle of protests continue to occur over and over again? And would anyone like to start? Whoever would like to can jump in. So let's have Eymen and then Mehdi.
Let me ask you a different question, actually. You talk about the regional protest. Why in the Northwest, which is as poor as the South, they don't have this protest now? Why El Kef doesn't have protest? Why in Tabarka, which is really poor area, they don't have a protest? You have to understand, this is political protests that they are funded by people who don't want to have a government that is in place. These protests are, there are trucks who take people, they fund them, they give them money, they give them food to go protest. This is what we're talking about. This is a very, very rich area where very many people make a lot of money, and they have their best interest to not have a government in place because they are dealing with smuggling. They're dealing with financial crimes. I mean, financial crimes in the border, whether it's money laundering, whether. So there are two options for the government, because the government has to be either strong there, with stronger, which is not easy. There is a part of Tunisia that is not really controlled in the sense that we don't have the power to control the super south, where there is so much money there, there's so much informal economy that is really tough to deal with. Or the other way is like, okay, you know what? That part, we're gonna let them basically help work as they want. We're gonna remove any restriction if they wanna do, it's pretty much like a free zone called, So, and I think this is an overstatement that is made by the way, by many donors, like there are some regional discrepancies. I'm gonna give you a number, actually, I don't remember the number exactly, but if you take how much government spent by person in the south, it's way higher than many other people because it's not populated region. And like if you take Tatawin, for example, a lot of money was spent before and after the revolution. So it's not like the government is like putting that inside. There are basically there are always some political turmoil coming from the south, and this is go back 2,000 years ago. I was reading a book on Tunisia. Was written by Sophie Bessis that Mehdi and Ons know. It's as if they are talking about today. It's as if they're talking about. It's always the same story. They take people from the south, they promise them stuff, they give them money to go turmoil, and that's it. It's manipulated in the south. We know it to make the government, the central government, weaker. Why? Because that's in their best interest. I'm not talking about the population. The population is a victim, It's some big players who basically are smugglers, and there are a lot of money involved, and basically they're using that as an excuse to basically show and negotiate with the government in different levels.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Thank you, Sarah. A few things here, or I can tend to agree with Eymen on a certain manipulation in certain areas in the south, especially by the borders, where there is a number of people who have an interest to maintain the chaos there. So there is a certain manipulation, but also, if we compare between the north and the south, in the north they don't have also the cash cow that you can have in the south, like the oil and gas companies or the phosphate that has been just provide, the whole cities, certain areas where living around these companies, and they got used to it. So when these companies could not fulfill their expectations, they were the first to be attacked and blocked, which maybe in the north they didn't have this advantage or disadvantage. Depends how we want to see it. But also the issue that we have, I think it's we can look way back from now. What happened also years ago, and that starts since the Ben Ali system. It's a disconnect between the education system and the employment system in Tunisia. What we've done, we believe that equity or equality was to create. If we create a marketing university in Tunisia, we have to create a marketing university in Gabes or in Gafsa. And we started to do spreading that like that, without looking at what was the need of the market. And at the end, what happened is in rural areas, we found ourselves with 3,000 bachelor's degree in marketing in oil and gas areas, the same, and that has creating a big gap between the expectation of this young graduate and what the market was offering. I think if we want to help, that's my opinion, of course. If you want to help develop the regions, we should not look at a comparison with the cities or with the coastline. We need to look at their specificity. We need to look at their potential. You know, I worked a lot in the oil and gas. I give you an example. I worked a lot in the south, actually, in the oil and gas sector, and I've seen specific cases that were extremely sad. I've seen young graduates coming from families with a good piece of land. Father was a farmer, and if we would have trained this person to become a better farmer than the father, and better with it, if we have like put together universities, agriculture university in that area to help them do better of what they have, it would have been way better than training that a young man who's coming from a rural family to become a bachelor's degree in order not to repeat marketing again in commercial or anything in design in an area that he didn't want to leave, but where there were no jobs for his skills. The problem also is like in taking these people to this university, you hire their expectation. They don't want to work their land anymore, because also what we've done is we destroyed let's say how we view smaller jobs, how we view being a farmer. It's not a small job, it's not a low job, it's an excellent job. But in taking these people to this different curriculum, we made them kind of look down on what was a job of their parents, and make them a bachelor's degree of a skill that is not sellable on the market, but they could not find a job. They didn't want to go back to where they were. So, and I think, I know it's, I'm going a bit everywhere here, but because it's something that I really lived there, and it was very sad for me to see this young graduate taking small job that was way below their competencies in a big company, just because they were trained to and taught that they needed to get an office job. And there it was not well paid, it was not adapted to them, but because we didn't educate them to meet the need of the market. This is why for me, for the future, it's extremely important to have a way better coordination, synergy built between the public sector and the private sector, and between school, universities, and businesses. As if we don't do that, we are going to keep creating unemployed people, unemployed youth, keep creating frustration, and keep creating revolts.
Thank you. Yes, Ons.
Yeah, if I can add something to that as well, I think it's important to say that inequality and marginalization is a fact and is real. And of course, you'll always have manipulation, and you'll always have different interests in terms of putting or emphasizing the social movements, but we cannot deny that the roots are real and there. And I think it's also linked to a policy of the state for a very, very long time about, and we are not talking about equality, we are talking about opportunities and equal access to opportunities, because when we are talking about basic services that the government and the state needs to be providing in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of access to transport, to basic rights, the access is not the same, and this is the reality. And in a time where the revolution brought hopes of change, there were expectations in these regions that they were marginalized under the dictatorship even way before, and those expectations were not met because how the state is approaching development is through, the intervention of creating jobs, and the government and the state creating jobs and creating public-owned companies, and really emphasizing this importance of the need to be in a state employed in a state-owned company to ensure security and sustainability of employment, when what was needed is for the state to identify what is its role, to provide basic services, health, education, transport, etc., and to open up those regions to really unleash the potential there. There has starting to have initiatives like the Startup Act, which the basic and the idea behind that is really to open it for if you are a young lady or gentleman from the south, if you are from Tatooine or Sousse or whatever region you are, you have exactly the same opportunities, you have exactly the same chances, and it really depends on your effort and on your willingness. It does not depend on where you were born or the context on which you are living. And I think today the post-COVID crisis showcased this marginalization, which is real. And I think that, again, for us to be able, because we cannot talk about sustainable growth or even potential growth if we don't really treat the roots of this sense of division within the country, if we don't also take it seriously and really treat the roots. And I think this needs real attention in terms of shifting the pattern of seeing this from a government perspective. Again, not treating it in terms of injecting money, but trying to create growth and create more, let's say, richness from those regions, actually, that has a lot of potential to offer to the country.
Thank you. Another issue that Mehdi mentioned originally was this idea of public debt and public spending, the problems there. And what I think we saw Prime Minister Fakhfakh was sort of poised to actually implement some austerity measures and trying to address this a little bit. Now that he will be gone, I'm curious, what do you think, what do you expect, or what would you hope the next government would do, or how can the next government actually address this issue? We've actually had a question come in to asking about the role of the UGTT, the union, and sort of how do you balance this, real need to actually cut down public sector spending, but also, recognize the power of the UGTT and the importance of protecting workers. How do you see this? What can the next government actually do to try to address some of these challenges? And let's start with Mehdi.
Sure, thank you. I think there's many things. There is no one solution. There's not the magical button here that can fix everything. But clearly, we cannot keep surviving with public companies being managed that way and accumulating debts. It's not acceptable today to have let's say I take one example, to have a Tunisian airline company having a rate of about 300 employees per plane, which is beyond anything we can see. I'm not talking about here about firing people, but I'm talking about the fact that there is a serious need to restructure these companies and a serious need to improve partnership, public-private partnership, to enhance efficiency of these companies, and see the Tunisian government focusing more on fundamental public services, and let it go a little bit on other public companies in order to allow a partnership, strategic partnership with the private sector to restructure them and to make them more competitive. Because at the end, it's not about losing jobs. It's about creating companies that are more efficient, companies that will create new jobs, and that will create additional growth for the company and for the country. We should not, and I think that's one of the issues that why we are not restructuring this company, because we look at them in silo. We look at them company by company. Now, if we touch this company, how many jobs we will lose? If we should not look at them like that, we should look at them in a helicopter view. If we restructure this company and make them more efficient, how that can help the overall economy and how that can help improve the country efficiency and improve unemployment in this country.
Thank you. Eymen or Ons, would either of you like to come in on this?
Yes.
Sorry, let's start with Ons and then Eymen. Go ahead, Ons.
Yeah, a quick comment on that. I think this debate is going to be paused again because we have a lot of reforms that need to happen. Today we are talking about public-owned state company. The minister, for example, the Minister of Industry mentioned that the industry is going to expect to drop by 30% in 2020. So you will have strategic sectors that they are going to be highly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially companies and sectors that are going to be highly touched by this. So the issue, unfortunately, in this case, is still political, because here we are talking about being able to have a vision, to share in a very clear way without, let's say, beyond and above the ambition and the intention, clearly what is the plan. Because unfortunately, until today, we are talking about, the challenge in debt, we challenge in state-owned companies, the challenge in this sector, the challenge in transport, in Tunisia, etc. But no one was able until now, at least at the level of the political landscape, to propose a clear implementation plan based on which you can start negotiating with the unions, etc. And I think this is also the weak spot in all of that is, and this goes back to the fact that being in a situation when you have more than 10 governments in less than 10 years, it's not a matter of having 10 or 20 governments. It's a matter of no one can really be able to develop a vision and have the time to implement it and deal with the consequences of it. So this consequentive changes in the government put us in a situation where the problem are still there, the problem are growing, but the debate is still not at the right positioning, and which leads to a situation where you cannot have a proper negotiation because you clearly don't know what you are going to do.
Thank you. Eymen.
I agree with some of it, but I think the problem is much deeper in a sense that the political system that we have in Tunisia means that we can't have stability. It's by definition, you basically have laws passing. I mean, you have the head of parliament who might be basically removed on asked to resign because one of the parliament member might come late in the morning and he doesn't vote. I mean, sometimes it's 1 or 2 votes that change laws. So what's happening is because of the political system that we have, it's so fragile that we have two options. Basically, either we're gonna say, okay, we have to change it, or we're going to say, this is what we agreed on, and then basically we should learn how to work without the government. Basically, let the politician do their politics, and basically let the economy work by itself. We basically have a system like, for example, Belgium. They work without the government for 2 years. I mean, it's pretty much what it is. You're talking about, for example, the next government. People talking about the next government, because everybody knows that the next government is going to have the toughest quarter ever, where basically they need to negotiate restructuring of debt, something we never had done since '56, since independence. They know they gave him a time bomb in his hands, and basically it's going to explode. So they're looking for who they're going to sacrifice. So you sacrifice the next government, so they're going to put everybody who want them to sacrifice, so they can build for the next one, which is in 2021. This is the situation where people are thinking. So with that political situation, basically, the only issue is, okay, let's remove authorization, let's remove more regulation, let's let the people work by themselves. If you need to help people, basically let them do let them be entrepreneurs, let them do their business by themselves. And remove the bureaucracy and remove anything that is basically not letting them working independent. People are fed up of government. People are fed up of parliament. I mean, you have to see the parliament scene these days. It looks like, I don't know, Broadway show. Actually, Broadway show is not even enough. I mean, this is just insane. I mean, I advise everybody who's basically watching this is completely insane. This is a luxury you cannot have in Tunisia, because we reach a level where basically we don't have any more savings. This is a luxury that can be supported by Belgium maybe, but not Tunisia. So at some point, the next government is going to explode. I mean, at best, it's going to last for 6 months, let's say. And then let's talk about the next government, which is then after this one, after the next one, what I mean. Would they have the courage to say, okay, now we hit bottom, you know, let's do something about this. Let's do major reform. And by major reform, it has to be basically like a Schumpeter, way of thinking. Maybe this is the opportunity to change the business model. I mean, I always take the example of Mauritius Island in the late 70s, beginning of 80s. 50% of the GDP is coming from sugarcane. Sugarcane dropped by 50% in the beginning of 80s. They didn't have other choices. And they didn't have the best political system, by the way. I mean, I don't want to get into that. They decided to make Mauritius Island a hub for financial industries and a hub for tourism. And I have been gone many times to Mauritius Islands, and I can tell you the beaches in Tunisia are way better. I mean, it's a matter of will. I mean, you can make Tunisia as a financial hub, as a service hub with the healthcare, education, as Mehdi mentioned before. It could be a hub for tourism. Change the business model. We can't afford, as Ons and Mehdi said, subsidize Tunisair. This is not possible. This is money is not going to education. This money is not going to healthcare. You have to stop the dance. So, and to have that courage, you need to have a strong political backing, which you will not be able to have with this political system. Fair enough. I'm not asking that we need to change that, but at least we learn how to work with that political system. That's what Darwin said. This survival of species. The species that survive, they are not the strongest or the smartest one, or the one who can adapt to them to their environment. So that's the only way to basically get out of the situation. I mean, that's my point.
Thank you. Mehdi, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, agree with many things you said, Eymen. Just where I disagree slightly is in saying we can work without a government. Maybe let's leave the government on the side. And just before it was weekend, let's the black market helped us go through the COVID situation and so on. It's a circumstance, and it should be just on. We should not get used to that. We should not get used to that, and we should. And as much as I'm with you, we need to fully push so that there is that we reduce bureaucracy, that we enhance digitalization, so that the work with the government and the public sector is smoother. That we need to restructure our public companies and so on. I'm still also very keen on us giving all together a great focus on the political system, and I think the private sector, the economists like you, the people who are working with investors like us, needs to keep pushing to help this political system progress. Because at the end, we all of us here, we are criticizing a lot because we love this country, as you said. Our beaches are better than the one in, I don't know what you compare to, with the Reunion or whatever, more issues. And I definitely agree with you. We love that country. That's why we allow ourselves to criticize it. But at the end, we had our revolution 10 years ago, and in a time, in a historical time frame, it's still not a lot. There is a lot of things that we gain. We gain that democracy, we gain that freedom. We saw an unbelievable civil society being extremely active and helping, actually, we're talking about that, the political system change, evolve, being the safeguard of it. We've seen, and I know you help a lot of young entrepreneurs. We see an unbelievable new crowd of young entrepreneurs with a lot of creativity. These are the people that give me a lot of hope for the future. I think we have a real responsibility as a business sector also, not to drop the ball and say, okay, fine, this is how it is. We will live with it, and we will act as there is no government, as a black market can work. And we need to keep lobbying. I'm sorry to use the word lobbying works very well in the US, but less in Tunisia, but fine. I'm using it. We keep lobbying, keep helping to push, maybe not change the full political system, but, and just before you talked about the political system, there's difference also between the political system and the electoral law. That is the one that is actually creating a lot of disturbance in the spectrum of political parties that we have in the parliament. And there is few things like that. The electorate law is way easier to change than the political system. And if we all push toward one sense in saying that, no, actually, in order to help the economy where we work, us as a private sector, as economists, we need to have certain stability. We can push towards small things like the electoral law and push for that in order to help create better stability for the government and for the state. Because at the end, yes, we need more freedom economically. We need to have a better playground and a more free playground, but we need to have a strong state and a strong partner to work with.
Thank you. We've had several questions come in, and we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to try to get to some of these. Two questions that are related, which is, what is Tunisia's niche? In what sectors can Tunisia add jobs and expand production? And similarly, says, while it's important to discuss the economic challenges, what are the most important opportunities? Can we identify any emerging sectors for the near future? And so I'd like to hear from you guys on, what are you guys have talked a little bit about some of them, and Eymen, you were starting to mention some areas, tourism, for example, but what do you see as the sort of most likely areas for expansion? And, as we sort of go into this new normal of the post-COVID or COVID world, what are Tunisia's opportunities? And maybe Ons, I'll turn to you first, and then Mehdi.
Sure. So obviously, you can see in terms of opportunities, clearly you have sectors like ICT is one of the major sectors that presents a lot of opportunity. And I think the fact that, taking an example of Tunisia, the fact that you'll have a private sector that really were mobilized during the crisis to propose solutions, to innovate in a very quick and responsive way, really shows the quality and the added value of such a sector in Tunisia. And this has always been one of the top priority sectors for investment in the country. And I think it does continue to be one of the most promising sectors to progress with. The second one, I think, everything related to pharmaceuticals is one of also the sectors where Tunisia has very strong assets. since the past, and now with all what's happening in terms of the pandemic, Tunisia has also great assets to play with. The third element, I think, the sector that can be interesting to look at is in terms of agribusiness. I think it's also linked to the fact that we are seeing new trends in terms of consumption, in terms of the culture, also in terms of what consumers are looking for, and the trend towards sustainability as well. And a sector like agribusiness and agriculture in a country like Tunisia can be one that is very promising and worth investing in and prioritizing in terms of the government strategy in terms of investment. And I think, again, I cannot stop emphasizing this represents a great opportunity for the country. The crisis has, of course, its negative ramifications, but it represents an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to change the approach of how we do investment, and what do we want to present ourselves as a country, what do we want to be able to promote, what is the branding. I think Tunisia did a really great job handling the pandemic and being able to sell this experience and showcase that Tunisia was really strong dealing with such crisis, and presented in a very positive way, can lead to opening new areas of investment in the country.
Thank you, Mehdi, and then Eymen.
Thank you. So I think I want to go back to what Ons mentioned. I think fully agree with you on new technology, pharmaceutical. You talked about agribusiness. Definitely, it's a huge sector with a great potential, and Tunisia is only in the beginning of its capabilities of export and adapting in new market. I mentioned the health sector. The tourism sector that need to be reformed. Education is very, very, very important in Tunisia, and we were a hub, an African hub for a long time that we are losing, that it can be re-energized today with a strong partner from the US, from France, from the UK. But maybe I'd like to stop quickly on the energy sector. Of course, there's the great potential in the oil and gas sector in the Gulf of Gabes, in the south of Tunisia and so on. But especially, I'd like to emphasize renewable and energy efficiency. The potential of Tunisia is absolutely huge there, both in developing our energy independency, but also in creating on a long-term capabilities for export. I mean, there is a long-term project in Tunisia, like the ELMED project, like the Tunur project, who have a potential to make Tunisia an exporter of renewable electricity to Europe. And I think this is an area that we should look at very strongly. We have, as Eymen said, we have the best sea, but we have also the best sun. But seriously, what we call the rate of sunshine in certain areas of Tunisia is beyond all the standard that we can see around the world, and there is a absolutely great potential for that. But your question bring me to the question of your auditor, I think, brings me to something that is fundamental for Tunisia. I think the fact that people ask what are the potential of Tunisia is because we are not marketing this country well enough. And one of the first tool that needs to be put in place is a true marketing strategy of Tunisia and an aggressive economic diplomacy with the right synergy between the public and the private sector. This is something that we haven't put in place yet. We're still selling Tunisia with the old fashion tools, 2 hours from Paris, we are the center of Mediterranean. I mean, all that we know it, and I used it for the past 20 years. This is changed. Tunisia today is an incredible youth generation, incredible young entrepreneurs, is an incredible development in renewable energy, in IT. We need to look at how to improve carbon print for the companies that come here. This is an important one. Carbon capture. We need to become one of the green economy hub for our partners, European, American, and others. And I think that is one of the potential that we need to promote and it should be part of our economic diplomacy.
Thank you. Eymen, did you want to come in on this?
I just want to say that basically, you know, we can't talk about opportunity or without talking about resilience. I mean, COVID basically showed us that you might have the best. I mean, you take the sector like aeronautic, for example, which is a huge sector in Tunisia, where we have a huge hub and we are positioned in the right part of the value chain. But because of the whole global value chain is touched, you know, these sectors didn't show resilience as we hoped. What I would like to say, there are basically, let's say, two major categories: sectors with strong resilience that we basically need if they show opportunities, and sectors with potential opportunities. So this is the two axes that we need to look at: strong resilience. I'm talking about agribusiness, any consumer goods, pharmaceutical, as Ons mentioned, medical devices, education, etc. And sectors with potential opportunities, everything that is related to technology and innovation, e-commerce, cybersecurity, biotechnology, renewable energy, as Mehdi said. These are the two main categories that we need to basically look at in the near future.
Thank you. Another question that came in is, how bad is the bureaucracy in Tunisia? What needs to happen to make doing business easier? Who would like to start on that one or come in on that one? Mehdi, you're shaking your head. Do you want to? Go ahead.
I think we need a session about that specific question, but I will give a brief comment on that and hand it over to Mehdi. So I see that he's shaking his head and clearly wants to contribute to this question. So I think bureaucracy is a reality in the country, and I think it's one of the most, let's say, problematic barriers to investment when we are talking about investment and promoting new investments in the country. The regulatory role of the state is way heavier, and I think this is something that the government has been working on, and I think it's important to highlight effort that has been done in that sense. The last year, the cross-cutting law that was adopted, the investment cross-cutting law that was adopted, removed 20% of authorizations in the country. So that was, let's say, one of the most substantial reforms that were taking place in the country, because it touched on several different laws to change and to remove barriers and to really facilitate investment. An example of the once for only decree law that, for example, if you submit a document for an administration, another administration does not have to ask for the same document, which is something structural in terms of and revolutionary in how administration works. So there are small steps, but again, at this, and as I said initially, at this stage, this is not enough anymore. We cannot continue on rethinking in terms of small steps, because the world is moving very quickly. There are major changes and competition is very hard. So what was enough 5 years ago or 3 years ago is clearly not enough today. So we absolutely, and I think this is one of the major challenges that hopefully the new government will be taking into consideration, that drastic changes need to happen in terms of really allowing this ease of doing business in the country and opening the country for competition, at least, you know, so bureaucracy is not one of the, because we already have so much barriers, the competition, the crisis in terms of the global crisis. We should be able to at least eliminate the challenges that they are just depending on us as a country and as an economy. And I believe this is one of the key elements to for the next government to be working on.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Just a quick one. I think it's important to differentiate our criticism of bureaucracy from a civil servant. Because people often say, you know, they start criticizing the people that are there. But we need also to put ourselves in the shoes of certain people within the Tunisian administration. One, of course, there is a culture that needs to be changed, developed, so that the administration becomes more efficient, and that is indeed related to people and how we can make people evolve. But there is also the tools that are put in place at the disposition of the people within the administration, and we talked about digitalization before, fundamental. I mean, we still have in Tunisia a certain ministry that are not well connected, that don't have access to even video conference, and some others that are well advanced, like if you were in the US or in Europe, still not a consistency in the tools and capabilities and equipment that this administration has to be more efficient. And the other thing also, and I think goes back to the usual problem, is the instability of the political system, or the change in ministers and government. It's very difficult for the administration, for the civil servant to take risk of, say, or to be creative, to be ambitious in the development of a strategy, or in supporting a specific investment, because they know that potentially someone else will come in 6 months, or someone else will come in 1 year, and might not like what they've done. They might be also taken in front of the judge because they took something in the interest of the country, but actually it was not written black and white that they were allowed to do it. And at the end, it frustrates people and inhibit them. And I think that's also something that we need to work on in Tunisia, is to provide the right spirit to the administration, provide them with the right tools, but also provide them with the right support so they feel themselves empowered to take the right strategic decision for the interest of the country without fearing for themselves.
Thank you. We just have 2 minutes left. Eymen, did you want to come in with any final thoughts on that question?
Very quick. I was talking to one of my classmates back to school. She's French. She's based in Paris, and she was talking about the bureaucracy in Paris, and she was basically almost like talking about Tunisia. So bureaucracy is everywhere, and there is a mindset that I think we inherited it from the French, where we control ex ante and not ex post. So you make it very hard to get anything, and once you get it, there is no control. So it makes it like there is a few people who have the chance to get in, and once they are in, they have a competitive advantage that doesn't even help, promote competition. In some sense, there's a change of paradigm that has to be done with the bureaucracy, where basically the control has to be, like in the US, for example, ex ante, not ex post, and not ex ante, meaning like after, and not basically closing the door to begin with. And that's a change of mindset. It's going to take some time. It's starting slowly. Estonia did that. Estonia the decision was pure political decision. They basically decided like everything is basically free access, and they control afterward. I don't know which government is going to do it, but that's the way to go, I think.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a really interesting discussion. I'm sure our audience has learned quite a bit, and there are many more questions that we have not had the time to answer. But please, I guess you can't really join me, but I will thank you all. I really appreciate this, and I hope everyone who's watching is paying attention as Tunisia embarks on yet another government transition. And as we know, I've heard there are a lot of challenges, but also a lot of really great opportunities for Tunisia. I wish all of you the best, and thank you so much for joining us and participating in this discussion today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you all.